Ambassador Sarah Chen stepped out of her transport pod onto the crystalline platform of Zephyr Station. The massive orbital facility hung in the void between three star systems, serving as neutral ground for the Galactic Council's most sensitive negotiations. Sarah had been here many times before, but today felt different. Today, humanity's future in the galaxy hung in the balance. The Terran Federation had been seeking full membership in the Galactic Council for over a decade. As one of the youngest species to achieve interstellar travel, humans were still viewed with suspicion by many of the older civilizations. Some called them aggressive. Others whispered they were unpredictable. Sarah's job was to prove them wrong. She walked through the station's corridors, her heels clicking against the polished floors. Alien beings of every shape and size moved around her. Tall, graceful Etherians with their flowing robes, chitinous hive speakers clicking in their complex languages, and the massive, boulder-like titans who rarely spoke, but whose presence commanded respect. Sarah nodded politely to each group she passed. The negotiation chamber was a marvel of engineering, designed to accommodate dozens of different species. The atmosphere was carefully controlled. The lighting adjusted to suit various visual spectrums, and translation devices hummed quietly in the background. Sarah took her seat at the human delegation's table and reviewed her notes one final time. Across the chamber, she noticed the Vorthon delegation. The Vorthons were an old species, proud of their ancient civilization and military traditions. Their representative, High Commander Kethvar, had been openly hostile to human membership from the beginning. His forearms gestured sharply as he spoke to his advisors, and his reptilian features showed clear displeasure. The session began with the usual formalities. Various species presented their concerns about human membership. Some worried about human military expansion. Others questioned whether humans could adapt to galactic law. Sarah addressed each concern professionally, presenting data about human colonies, trade agreements, and peaceful resolutions to conflicts. Then High Commander Kethvar stood to speak. His voice was deep and threatening as he addressed the chamber. Honored delegates, we gather here to discuss the admission of yet another young species to our ancient council. But I submit to you that humans are not ready for such responsibility. He activated a holographic display showing various human conflicts from Earth's history. Look at their past. Constant warfare. Destruction of their own planet's environment. Nuclear weapons used against their own kind. These are not the actions of a civilized species. Sarah felt her jaw tighten, but she maintained her composure. This was exactly the kind of opposition she had expected. She stood and activated her own display, showing human achievements in space exploration, medical breakthroughs, and peaceful first contacts with other species. High Commander Kethvar raises concerns about our past, Sarah began calmly. But every species in this chamber has a history of conflict. What matters is how we've grown. Humans have not engaged in interstellar warfare. We've honored every treaty we've signed. Our colonies exist in harmony with local ecosystems and neighboring civilizations. The debate continued for hours. Other delegates asked questions, raised concerns, and offered support. The Etherians spoke favorably of human artistic contributions to galactic culture. The hive speakers praised human adaptability and innovation. But the Vorthons remained firmly opposed. As the session drew to a close, the council president, an ancient being whose species Sarah couldn't identify, called for a recess. We will reconvene tomorrow to continue these discussions. All delegates are invited to tonight's cultural exchange dinner. Sarah gathered her materials, feeling cautiously optimistic. The debate had gone better than expected, despite Vorthon opposition. As she walked toward the exit, she noticed several delegates approaching her with encouraging words. Even some who had seemed neutral were warming to humanity's cause. The cultural exchange dinner was held in the station's grand ballroom, a massive space with transparent walls offering stunning views of the nearby nebula. Delegates mingled freely, sampling foods from dozens of worlds and discussing topics beyond politics. Sarah found herself in animated conversations about human music, literature, and scientific discoveries. She was speaking with a group of younger delegates when she noticed Kethvar approaching. The Vorthon commander's expression was unreadable as he stopped in front of her group. "Ambassador Chen," he said formally, "I would like a private word with you." The other delegates excused themselves, sensing the tension. Sarah faced Kethvar calmly, though her instincts told her something was wrong. His lower set of arms was hidden beneath his ceremonial robes, and his eyes held an intensity she hadn't seen during the formal debates. "Of course, High Commander. What can I do for you?" Kethvar stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Your species will not join this council. Not while I have breath in my body." His hand moved toward his robes, and Sarah caught a glimpse of metal. Time seemed to slow. Sarah's training kicked in as she recognized the threat. She stepped back, opening her mouth to shout a warning, but Kethvar was already moving. His concealed weapon, a Vorthon ceremonial blade crackling with energy, swept toward her chest. The attack happened in full view of dozens of delegates. Security systems activated immediately, but they would be too late. Sarah managed to partially deflect the blade with her forearm, but the energy discharge sent her sprawling across the floor. Pain shot through her body as the weapon's energy disrupted her nervous system. Chaos erupted in the ballroom. Delegates screamed and fled in all directions. Station security forces converged on the scene, weapons drawn. Kethvar stood over Sarah's prone form, his blade still crackling with deadly energy. But instead of finishing his attack, the Vorthon commander found himself surrounded by security forces and staring down the barrels of dozens of weapons. He dropped the blade and raised all four arms in surrender, a cold smile spreading across his reptilian features. Sarah struggled to sit up, her vision blurry from the energy discharge. Medical personnel were already rushing to her side. As they helped her to her feet, she saw Kethvar being restrained by security. Their eyes met across the chaos, and she saw no regret in his gaze, only satisfaction. The attack had lasted less than 30 seconds, but Sarah knew it would change everything. As medical scanners confirmed she would survive with only minor injuries, she couldn't shake the feeling that Kethvar had achieved exactly what he wanted. The question was, what came next? The news of the attack on Ambassador Chen spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Within an hour of the incident, every major news network in known space was broadcasting footage of the assassination attempt. The images were stark and undeniable. A high-ranking military officer of an ancient civilization attempting to murder a human diplomat during peace negotiations. Admiral Marcus Rodriguez received the emergency transmission while reviewing fleet deployments in the Sol system. His weathered face remained impassive as he watched the security footage, but those who knew him could see the dangerous stillness in his eyes. The Admiral had fought in humanity's first interstellar conflicts and had worked tirelessly to build the peaceful reputation that Chen was trying to protect. "Status of Ambassador Chen?" he asked his aide without looking away from the screen. "Stable condition, sir. Minor injuries from the energy discharge. She's refused evacuation and insists on continuing the negotiations." Admiral Rodriguez nodded slowly. Sarah Chen was tough. She had to be to survive in the cutthroat world of galactic politics. But the attack itself was secondary to what it represented. Someone had just declared war on human diplomacy, and that could not stand. "Get me a direct line to the Terran Council," he ordered, "and prepare a full fleet status report. I want to know the location and readiness of every ship we have." On Earth, the news hit the Terran Council like a physical blow. President Elena Vasquez called an emergency session, bringing together the planet's most powerful leaders in the secure chambers beneath Geneva. The room buzzed with angry voices as politicians and military leaders demanded immediate action. "This is an act of war," declared General Harrison, slamming his fist on the table. "We cannot allow such aggression to go unanswered." "We need to be careful," cautioned Secretary of State Williams. "If we overreact, we could lose everything we've worked for. The other council species might see us as the aggressors." President Vasquez raised her hand for silence. She was a small woman, but her presence filled the room. "What do we know about this Kethvar? His motivations? His connections?" Intelligence Director Sarah Park activated a holographic display. "High Commander Kethvar is Old Guard Vorthan military. His family has held high positions for over 3 centuries. He's known for extremist views about species purity and traditional galactic hierarchy. What's interesting is that he acted alone. Our sources indicate the Vorthan government is as shocked as everyone else." "That doesn't matter," General Harrison interjected. "One of their people tried to kill our ambassador. They need to be held accountable." "Sir," Director Park continued, "there's something else. Our monitoring stations have detected unusual fleet movements from several Vorthan worlds. Nothing overtly aggressive, but their ships are moving into defensive positions. The room fell silent as the implication sank in. The Vorthans were preparing for something. Whether it was retaliation for their commander's actions or something else entirely, humanity needed to be ready. Meanwhile, aboard Zephyr Station, Ambassador Chen sat in the medical bay, refusing painkillers despite the doctor's protests. Her arm was bandaged where the energy blade had struck, but her mind was sharp and focused. She was reviewing intelligence reports when her secure communicator chimed. "Sarah, thank God you're all right." Admiral Rodriguez's voice was tight with concern and controlled anger. "I'm fine, Marcus. Just a scratch. What's the situation back home?" "The Council is furious. Half of them want to send the entire fleet to make a statement. The other half want to recall you immediately and withdraw from negotiations entirely." Chen shook her head. Even though Rodriguez couldn't see her, that's exactly what Kethvar wanted. If we overreact, we prove their point about human aggression. If we withdraw, we show weakness. Either way, we lose. So what do you recommend? We continue the negotiations. We show the galaxy that one extremist won't derail human diplomacy. But Marcus, she paused, choosing her words carefully. Make sure our fleets are ready. Something about this feels bigger than one crazy commander. Her instincts proved correct. Within hours of the attack, protests erupted on Vorthon worlds. But these weren't protests condemning Kethavar's actions. They were rallies supporting him. Crowds gathered in major cities, chanting ancient war songs and demanding the expulsion of humans from galactic space. The Vorthon government found itself in an impossible position. Prime Minister Thalric had worked hard to maintain his species' reputation and influence in galactic politics. Kethvar's attack threatened everything, but the popular support for the commander's actions made any strong condemnation politically dangerous. On Zephyr Station, the other delegates watched nervously as the situation escalated. The Etherian delegation sent formal condolences to humanity and condemnation of the attack. The Hive speakers offered to provide additional security for the human delegation, but several other species remained ominously silent. Ambassador Chen returned to her quarters that evening to find a message waiting for her. It was from Kethvar himself, somehow transmitted from his detention cell. The message was simple and chilling. Ambassador Chen, you survived today, but you have already lost. My people now see humans for what you truly are, a threat to galactic order. Your presence here proves that young species cannot control their ambitions. The old ways are best. Some things are worth dying for. Chen read the message 3 times before deleting it. She understood now that the attack wasn't personal. It was calculated. Kethavar had sacrificed his freedom and possibly his life to create a crisis that would unite opposition to humanity. He had turned himself into a martyr for his cause. She activated her secure communicator and requested an emergency conference with Earth. President Vasquez's face appeared on the screen, flanked by Admiral Rodriguez and the Terran Council's senior advisors. "Sarah, we've been monitoring the situation on Vorthon worlds," the president began. "It's not good. There are reports of anti-human riots in several cities. Their military is mobilizing under the guise of maintaining order." "It gets worse," Admiral Rodriguez added. "We're picking up communications chatter suggesting other species might be getting nervous about human expansion. Some are questioning whether we can be trusted if one of our diplomats can provoke such a reaction." Chen felt a chill run down her spine. The attack was working exactly as planned. "What are our options?" President Vasquez looked grim. "Officially, we continue to pursue diplomatic solutions. Unofficially, we're preparing for the possibility that diplomacy may fail. How quickly can you wrap up the negotiations?" The vote was scheduled for next week, but given current circumstances, Chen shook her head. "I don't think we have that long. If the situation continues to deteriorate, some delegates might leave the station entirely." "Then we accelerate the timeline," Rodriguez said firmly. "Push for an emergency vote. Force them to make a decision before the opposition can organize further." As the conference ended, Chen stared out her window at the swirling nebula beyond the station. Beautiful and vast, it reminded her of the galaxy's infinite possibilities. But it also emphasized how small and fragile human civilization was in the cosmic scale. She had less than 48 hours to save humanity's galactic future. The question was whether Kethvar had already made that impossible. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened 18 hours after the attack. The great chamber buzzed with tension as delegates filed in, many casting worried glances at the human section. Ambassador Chen sat calmly at her table, her bandaged arm visible to all as a stark reminder of the previous day's events. Council President Veltar called the session to order with a heavy expression. The ancient being's voice carried the weight of centuries as it addressed the assembly. We gather in unprecedented circumstances. An act of violence has been committed within these sacred halls, disrupting negotiations that have lasted months. We must decide how to proceed. High Minister Thalric of the Vorthan delegation stood first. His ceremonial robe seemed heavier than usual, and his proud bearing had given way to visible strain. Honored delegates, I come before you to express my government's deepest regret for the actions of Commander Kethvar. His attack on Ambassador Chen was unauthorized and contrary to everything our civilization stands for. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Some delegates seemed surprised by the formal apology, while others appeared skeptical. Thalric continued, his voice growing stronger. However, I must also address the circumstances that led to this tragic event. Commander Kethvar, while wrong in his methods, was motivated by legitimate concerns about human expansion and militarization. Perhaps it is time to examine whether humanity is truly ready for full council membership. Ambassador Chen felt her blood pressure rise, but she kept her expression neutral. This was the pivot she had feared, using the attack to justify the very opposition it was meant to create. Furthermore, Thalric continued, the reaction from human military forces has been concerning. Fleet movements, military exercises, veiled threats of retaliation. Is this how a peaceful species responds to a single individual's crime? The accusation hung in the air like poison. Chen could see some delegates nodding thoughtfully, doubt creeping into their expressions. The Vorthan minister was skillfully turning victim into aggressor. Chen stood slowly, wincing slightly as the motion pulled at her injured arm. Thank you, High Minister Thalric, for your government's expression of regret. I accept it in the spirit it was offered. Her voice was calm but carried clearly throughout the chamber. However, I must address the implication that human defensive preparations somehow justify or explain the attack upon my person. Commander Kethvar did not attack me because he was responding to human aggression. He attacked me because he fundamentally opposes human membership in this council, and he believed that violence would advance his cause. She activated a holographic display showing timeline data. Our military movements were standard defensive procedures, initiated only after the attack, not before. We have threatened no one. We have mobilized against no one. We have simply ensured our ability to protect our citizens and interests, which is the right and responsibility of every sovereign species. Delegate Mordan, of the Etherian Consortium, rose gracefully. If I may, President Veltar, there is a larger issue at stake here. Regardless of the motivations behind Commander Kethvar's actions, we cannot allow political violence to influence our decisions. To do so would set a dangerous precedent. Indeed, clicked Hive speaker Zetra, her mandibles translating complex pheromone communications into audible words. The collective has observed human behavior for decades. Their actions have been consistently peaceful and cooperative. One individual's violence should not overshadow this record. But not all delegates were supportive. Representative Kolvan of the Titan Coalition spoke in his species' characteristic slow, rumbling tones. The young species brings uncertainty, old patterns disrupted. Perhaps caution is wisdom. The debate continued for hours with various delegates expressing support, opposition, or uncertainty about human membership. Chen noticed a pattern emerging. The older, more established civilizations tended toward caution or opposition, while newer species and those who had worked closely with humanity offered support. During a recess, Chen received an urgent message from Earth. Admiral Rodriguez's face appeared on her private communicator, his expression grim. Sarah, we have a problem. Our deep space monitoring stations have detected massive fleet movements from multiple Vorthon worlds. They're positioning ships along major trade routes and near several human colonies. Chen's stomach dropped. How many ships? Over 200 vessels, including their newest dreadnoughts. They're claiming it's a training exercise, but the formations are clearly military deployments. Our analysis suggests they could blockade 3 of our major colonies within hours if they chose to. What about the other council species? Are they aware of this? That's the concerning part. Yes, they are. We've intercepted communications indicating that several governments have been briefed on Vorthon fleet positions. Some seem supportive, others are demanding explanations, but none are taking action to prevent it. Chen closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the situation. They're forcing a confrontation. If we respond militarily, we look aggressive. If we don't, we look weak. There's more, Rodriguez continued. Our intelligence sources report that Kethfer has been in communication with military commanders on multiple Vorthon worlds. The attack wasn't the action of a lone extremist. It was a signal. The implications were staggering. The assassination attempt wasn't just political theater. It was the opening move in a larger strategy to isolate humanity and potentially force them out of civilized space entirely. When the session resumed, President Veltar called for final statements before the vote on human membership. Chen knew this would be her last chance to address the council before they decided humanity's fate. She stood, her injury forgotten in the face of what she now understood to be an existential moment for her species. Honored delegates, we have gathered here today ostensibly to discuss human membership in this council. But what we are really discussing is whether political violence and intimidation will be allowed to override justice and reason. She gestured toward the Vorthon delegation. The attack on my person was not random. It was calculated. It was designed to create exactly the crisis we now face, to provide justification for the military buildup that is occurring even as we speak. Thalric started to object, but Chen continued. Yes, High Minister, we are aware of your fleet movements. Over 200 warships positioned to threaten human space. Is this how a peaceful civilization responds to one individual's unauthorized actions? Gasps and angry murmurs filled the chamber. Many delegates were clearly unaware of the scope of Vorthon military activity. The choice before you is simple, Chen continued, her voice rising with passion. Do you reward aggression and intimidation, or do you stand for the principles that this council was founded upon? Do you allow fear and prejudice to guide your decisions, or do you choose hope and cooperation? She paused, looking directly at delegates who had seemed uncertain. Humanity asks only for the chance to contribute to galactic civilization as an equal partner. We have proven our commitment to peace through decades of cooperation. We have proven our value through scientific advancement and cultural exchange. We have proven our resolve by refusing to be intimidated by those who would use violence to silence us. As she sat down, the chamber fell silent. President Veltar called for the vote, and Chen held her breath as the results appeared on the central display. The numbers were closer than she had hoped, but better than she had feared after the attack. Humanity had gained membership in the Galactic Council by a narrow margin, but the victory felt hollow given the circumstances. What Chen didn't know was that her defiant speech and humanity's measured response had been carefully monitored by intelligence networks throughout the galaxy. While some species saw weakness in humanity's restraint, others began to recognize something far more dangerous, a species that could respond to provocation with calculated precision rather than emotional reaction. The real test was about to begin. 3 days after humanity's acceptance into the Galactic Council, the Vorthon fleet made its move. What they called Operation Righteous Cleansing began with simultaneous attacks on 3 human colonies, New Geneva, Terra Nova, and Kepler Station. The assault was swift, coordinated, and devastating. Admiral Marcus Rodriguez received the first distress signals while reviewing council membership procedures in his flagship's ready room. The automated emergency broadcasts painted a picture of horror: orbital bombardments, landing forces, civilians fleeing in panic. Within minutes, similar reports flooded in from the other targeted colonies. Sir, we're receiving priority transmissions from all 3 colonies, his communications officer reported, voice tight with strain. Vorthon fleets are demanding unconditional surrender. They claim they're acting under ancient galactic law to remove a contaminated species from civilized space. Rodriguez stood slowly, his weathered face hardening into an expression his crew knew meant war. How many ships do they have at each colony? 73 vessels at New Geneva, including 4 dreadnoughts. 81 at Terra Nova, 67 at Kepler Station. Sir, that's over 200 ships total, their entire expeditionary fleet. The Admiral walked to the view screen showing the peaceful blue marble of Earth below. Somewhere out there, human civilians were dying because their species had dared to seek equality in galactic civilization. The irony wasn't lost on him. Humanity's greatest diplomatic victory had triggered their greatest military crisis. Status of our forces: we have 47 ships in immediate response range, sir. The bulk of the fleet is scattered across our territories on routine patrol. It would take 18 hours to assemble significant reinforcements. 47 ships against 200. In any conventional analysis, it was hopeless. But Rodriguez had not risen to command humanity's space forces by accepting conventional wisdom. Send immediate recall orders to all vessels. Emergency speed to Rally Point Delta, and get me a direct line to Earth Command. President Vasquez appeared on the secure channel within minutes, her face pale but determined. Behind her, Rodriguez could see the emergency command center bustling with activity. Marcus, tell me you have good news. I'm afraid not, Madam President. The Vorthons have committed their entire expeditionary fleet to this operation. Our colonies are under siege and we're outnumbered 4-1. What are our options? Rodriguez had been asking himself that same question since the first distress call. Conventionally, we evacuate what civilians we can and prepare for a fighting withdrawal. The Vorthons have superior numbers and firepower. In a direct confrontation, we lose. And unconventionally, the Admiral's expression grew cold. We remind the galaxy why human military doctrine is based on mobility, innovation, and the principle that sometimes the best defense is a good offense. What do you need? Full authorization for Operation Prometheus. And Marcus, he used the President's first name, something he rarely did. Tell Ambassador Chen to make sure the Council understands what's happening here. This isn't just an attack on humanity. It's a test of whether the Council's principles mean anything. On Zephyr Station, Ambassador Chen was already dealing with the political fallout of the attacks. Emergency sessions had been called, but the responses were tepid and bureaucratic. Some species expressed concern, others called for restraint from all parties, and a few remained ominously silent. The Vorthon actions are clearly in violation of galactic law, declared Delegate Morden during the emergency session. Unprovoked attacks on civilian populations cannot be tolerated. High Minister Thalric stood to respond. His demeanor completely changed from the apologetic tone he had used after Kethvar's attack. These are not unprovoked attacks. They are justified responses to human aggression and expansion. Ancient protocols allow for the quarantine of dangerous species. Ancient protocols that haven't been invoked in over 1,000 years. Chen interjected, and only then against species that had actually committed acts of interstellar warfare. Humanity's only crime was seeking membership in this council. Exactly, Thalric replied smugly. A membership that should never have been granted. The attacks on our colonies, the military buildups, the aggressive expansion into traditional Vorthon space, all evidence that humans cannot be trusted with galactic citizenship. Chen felt a chill of recognition. Attacks on Vorthon colonies. High Minister, what attacks are you referring to? Thalric activated a holographic display showing damaged space stations and burning settlements. These images were taken 6 hours ago from our border colonies. Human vessels launched surprise attacks immediately after your council membership was confirmed. Clearly, you saw admission as license for aggression. The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. Chen stared at the images in disbelief. They clearly showed human ships attacking Vorthon installations. But she knew it was impossible. All human forces had been accounted for, and none were anywhere near Vorthon space. These images are fabricated, Chen stated firmly. No human forces have attacked Vorthon territories. This is a false flag operation designed to justify your unprovoked assault on our colonies. Are you calling us liars? Thalric's voice rose dangerously. I'm stating facts. Those images have been doctored to show human vessels that were never there. President Veltar raised a hand for order. This is a serious accusation, Ambassador Chen. Do you have proof? Chen's mind raced. She had no immediate proof, but she knew the attacks were fabricated. However, without evidence, her denials would seem like desperate deflection. I request an immediate investigation by Council observers, she said. Send neutral parties to examine the alleged attack sites. Send them to verify the current positions of human fleets. The truth will become clear. An investigation will take days to organize, Thalric protested. Meanwhile, human aggression continues. We cannot wait for bureaucratic processes while our people suffer. Chen saw the trap closing. The Vorthons had planned this perfectly. Fake attacks to justify real ones timed to occur when verification would be impossible in the short term. By the time the truth came out, it would be too late. As the Council debated procedures and protocols, real combat was erupting in space around New Geneva. The human defenders, vastly outnumbered but fighting for their homes, had managed to hold the Vorthon fleet at bay for several hours. Admiral Sarah Martinez, commanding the colony's defense force, had used every trick in the book to delay the inevitable. Her flagship, the TFS Defiant, limped through space on emergency power, its armor scarred by energy weapons and its crew fighting to keep vital systems online. Around her, the remnants of her fleet continued to harass the Vorthon blockade, buying time for civilian evacuations. Admiral, we're receiving a priority transmission from Earth Command, her communications officer reported. Admiral Rodriguez's face appeared on her screen, his expression grim but determined. Sarah, what's your status? We've evacuated about 60% of the civilian population, sir. But we can't hold much longer. The Vorthons are bringing up their heavy units for a final push. Understood. Help is on the way, but I need you to hold for another 2 hours. Can you do it? Martinez looked around her battered bridge at her exhausted crew. They had already exceeded every reasonable expectation. We'll hold, sir. What help should we expect? Rodriguez's expression grew cold. The kind that will remind the galaxy why you don't corner a predator species. The transmission ended, leaving Martinez to wonder what her superior had planned. Around her, the battle for New Geneva continued, unaware that the fate of galactic civilization hung in the balance. What none of the combatants knew was that humanity's response would fundamentally change the nature of interstellar warfare forever. Admiral Rodriguez's flagship, the TFS Prometheus, cut through hyperspace at maximum velocity, leading a strike force that represented humanity's most advanced military technology. But this wasn't a rescue mission for the besieged colonies. It was something far more decisive. Sir, we're approaching the target system, reported Navigation Officer Kim. Vorthon Prime is heavily defended. Our intelligence shows over 300 orbital platforms and at least 50 capital ships in defensive positions. Rodriguez studied the tactical display with the cold precision that had made him legendary among human forces. The Vorthon homeworld hung before them like a jewel, surrounded by the accumulated military might of a civilization that had ruled space for millennia. They expect us to defend our colonies, Rodriguez said quietly. They expect us to react, to respond to their attacks conventionally. They think they understand human warfare. His tactical officer, Commander Sarah Brooks, looked up from her console. Sir, even with our technological advantages, attacking their homeworld directly is ambitious. They have us outnumbered 15-1. Rodriguez turned to face his bridge crew. These men and women had volunteered for what many considered a suicide mission. The Vorthons have made a fundamental error in their understanding of human nature. They think we're like them, hierarchical, predictable, bound by traditional military thinking. He gestured to the tactical display. They've committed their entire expeditionary fleet to attacking our colonies because that's how their species thinks. Control territory, demonstrate dominance, force submission through superior firepower. It's a strategy that has worked for them for thousands of years. But sir, Brooks continued, we're still talking about a direct assault on their capital world. Even if we succeed, the political ramifications will be exactly what we need, Rodriguez finished. The galaxy needs to understand that humanity doesn't play by the old rules. When you attack our civilians, you don't face our defenses, you face our offense. When you threaten our existence, we threaten yours. The strike force dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Vorthon system, their arrival detected immediately by automated sensors. Alarms began wailing across Vorthon Prime as military commanders scrambled to understand why a small human fleet had appeared in their most protected space. High Admiral Vextar, commanding Vorthon Prime's defenses, stared at his tactical display in disbelief. 47 ships? They sent 47 ships against our homeworld. He turned to his staff officers. This must be a diversion. Where are their real forces? His intelligence officer checked multiple displays before responding. Sir, our forces report that human fleets are still engaged at their colonies. These appear to be the only ships not committed to those battles. Then they've sent a token force to make a political gesture, Vextar concluded. Demonstrate that they can reach our homeworld, then withdraw before we destroy them. Typical human grandstanding. He was wrong. Rodriguez had spent months preparing for this moment, working with humanity's best strategic minds to develop what they called the Prometheus Protocol. It was based on a simple premise. In an age of galactic warfare, victory belonged not to the largest fleet, but to the most innovative one. All ships, execute Alpha Pattern, Rodriguez commanded. Brooks, activate the quantum resonance systems. Across the human fleet, new technology that had been decades in development came online. Quantum resonance drives allowed the ships to phase partially out of normal space, making them incredibly difficult to target while maintaining their ability to fire. Gravimetric weapons created localized distortions in spacetime itself, capable of crushing even the largest vessels. But the most devastating innovation was the neural network coordination system. Rather than operating as individual ships, the human fleet functioned as a single coordinated organism. Each vessel knew instantly what every other vessel was doing, allowing for tactical maneuvers that seemed impossible to outside observers. The Vorthon defenders opened fire first, thousands of energy beams lancing out toward the human ships, but the targets seemed to dance through space, slipping between weapon strikes like ghosts. Return fire from the human fleet struck with surgical precision, each shot carefully coordinated to maximize damage. Within minutes, a dozen Vorthon capital ships had been disabled or destroyed. Orbital platforms that had protected the homeworld for centuries erupted in brilliant explosions. The defensive fleet, designed to repel massive conventional assaults, found itself helpless against an enemy that refused to follow the rules of engagement they understood. How are they doing this? Demanded High Admiral Vextar, as another dreadnought exploded on his tactical display. Our weapons can't lock onto them. Sir, their ships seem to be using some form of dimensional phase technology, his science officer reported. They're existing partially in normal space and partially in quantum foam. Our targeting systems weren't designed for this type of warfare. Vextar felt a chill of recognition. The humans weren't just attacking with superior tactics. They were using a completely different form of warfare that made traditional defenses obsolete. On Zephyr Station, Ambassador Chen watched the battle unfold through emergency feeds. The images were stunning and terrifying. Human ships moving through space like predators, striking without warning and disappearing before retaliation could arrive. The mighty Vorthon defense fleet, pride of their civilization, was being systematically dismantled. This is madness, High Minister Thalric stated, his face pale as he watched his homeworld's defenses crumble. They're attacking a civilian population center. Chen kept her expression neutral, though inside she felt a mixture of pride and horror at the devastating effectiveness of human military technology. No, High Minister. They're attacking your military installations, just as your forces are attacking our civilian colonies. The difference is that our military is more effective. President Veltar called for order as delegates erupted in shocked discussion. Ambassador Chen, these tactics are unprecedented in galactic warfare. The level of destruction is precisely proportional to the threat against our species, Chen replied firmly. The Vorthons have committed genocide against human colonies. We are responding by neutralizing their ability to continue that genocide. As she spoke, she received a priority message from Admiral Rodriguez. His face appeared on her secure communicator, and behind him she could see the bridge of his flagship as it coordinated the ongoing assault. Ambassador, I need you to convey an ultimatum to the Council. The Vorthons have 30 minutes to recall their fleets from our colonies and surrender unconditionally. If they refuse, we will proceed to Phase 2 of Operation Prometheus. Chen felt her blood chill. She had been briefed on the operation's full scope, but she had hoped it wouldn't come to that. Admiral, are you certain? Phase 2 will end this war permanently. Rodriguez finished. The choice is theirs. Chen turned back to the council chamber knowing she was about to deliver an ultimatum that would either save galactic civilization or transform it forever. Around her, delegates watched in stunned silence as the images from Vorthon Prime continued to play. A proud, ancient civilization being brought to its knees by a species they had dismissed as primitive. What they didn't understand yet was that they had only seen the beginning of humanity's true capabilities. Ambassador Chen stood before the Galactic Council, her voice carrying across the stunned chamber as explosions from Vorthon Prime continued to flash on the emergency feeds. High Minister Thalric, your government has 30 minutes to order the immediate withdrawal of all Vorthon forces from human space and surrender unconditionally. Thalric's face had gone ashen as he watched his civilization's most powerful defenses crumble. You cannot seriously expect us to surrender to a handful of ships. Our forces still outnumber yours significantly. Your forces are currently besieging civilian colonies, Chen replied coldly. Our forces are systematically dismantling your homeworld's military infrastructure. The mathematics are quite clear. President Veltar raised a trembling appendage. Ambassador Chen, what exactly is Phase 2 that your admiral referenced? The Council has a right to know what level of escalation we might witness. Chen paused, knowing that her next words would echo through galactic history. Phase 2 involves the complete neutralization of Vorthon military capability throughout their empire. Every ship, every base, every orbital platform, all eliminated within a coordinated 12-hour window. The chamber erupted in shocked gasps and frantic discussion. Such an operation would require military capabilities beyond anything previously demonstrated in galactic warfare. That's impossible, declared Delegate Kolvan of the Titan Coalition. No species possesses such reach and precision. With respect, Chen replied, you said the same thing about our attack on Vorthon Prime. Yet their capital defenses are currently burning. Delegate Mordan of the Etherian Consortium stood gracefully, her flowing robes rippling with agitation. Ambassador Chen, such an operation would represent a fundamental shift in the galactic balance of power. Are humans truly prepared to assume that level of responsibility? Before Chen could answer, new alarms began sounding throughout Zephyr Station. Emergency broadcasts flooded the communication networks as reports came in from across Vorthon space. Not of additional human attacks, but of something far more ominous. Attention all vessels and stations, came the broadcast from Admiral Rodriguez's flagship. This is Admiral Marcus Rodriguez of the Terran Federation. As of this moment, all Vorthon military assets in space are designated hostile targets. Any vessel that does not immediately cease offensive operations and return to port will be engaged and destroyed. The transmission shifted to show a three-dimensional map of known space, with Vorthon territories highlighted in red. Suddenly, points of light began appearing throughout the display. Hundreds of them, scattered across dozens of star systems. Those lights represent human assets already in position, Rodriguez continued. Stealth platforms, automated systems, and special forces units that have been deployed over the past several months. They are currently targeting every significant Vorthon military installation in the galaxy. High Minister Thalric stared at the display in horror. Impossible. Our sensors would have detected such deployments. Your sensors were designed to detect conventional spacecraft and military formations. Rodriguez's voice continued from the broadcast. They were not designed to detect quantum phase reconnaissance platforms or macro-scale molecular assemblers. Chen watched the delegates' faces as the implications sank in. Humanity hadn't just attacked Vorthon Prime with a small fleet. They had positioned assets throughout Vorthon space over months or years of careful preparation. The attack on their homeworld wasn't desperation. It was the opening move of a perfectly orchestrated campaign. Furthermore, Rodriguez continued, these assets have been gathering intelligence on Vorthon military capabilities, troop movements, and strategic planning for some time. We are aware of Operation Righteous Cleansing, including the fabricated evidence used to justify attacks on our colonies and the planned expansion to target other human-friendly species. More gasps echoed through the chamber as delegates realized the scope of what they were witnessing. Humanity had not only anticipated Vorthon aggression but had prepared countermeasures that made their enemy's strategy irrelevant. The Vorthon government now has 25 minutes to comply with our demand for unconditional surrender. Failure to do so will result in the systematic elimination of their military capabilities and the occupation of their key worlds by human forces. The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. President Veltar was the first to speak, his ancient voice trembling with something between awe and fear. Ambassador Chen, Your species has demonstrated capabilities that no one in this chamber believed possible. How long have humans been capable of such operations? Chen considered her response carefully. President Veltar, humanity has been preparing for the possibility of galactic warfare since we first encountered other species. We hoped it would never be necessary, but we were not naive enough to believe that peaceful intentions guaranteed peaceful outcomes. High Minister Thalric suddenly stood, his composure cracking. You planned this. The attack on your ambassador, the membership application, all of it was a setup to justify this assault. On the contrary, Chen replied with icy calm. We hoped your species would prove capable of coexistence. Commander Kethvar's attack and your subsequent invasion of our colonies proved otherwise. We simply adapted our response to match the threat you presented. She gestured to the tactical display still showing burning Vorthon installations. The truth, High Minister, is that humanity could have eliminated the Vorthon Empire at any time over the past 5 years. We chose not to because we believed in the possibility of peaceful coexistence. Your government's actions have demonstrated that such coexistence is impossible. Delegate Zetra of the Hive speakers clicked rapidly, her translation device working to convert complex pheromone communications. The collective wishes to understand, if humans possess such overwhelming capabilities, why seek council membership at all? You could simply impose your will through force. Chen smiled sadly. Because force without legitimacy is tyranny. We didn't want to rule the galaxy through fear. We wanted to contribute to it through cooperation. But if peaceful cooperation is impossible, then we will ensure our survival and the survival of other peaceful species through whatever means necessary. As she spoke, new reports flooded in from across Vorthon space. The coordinated human strikes were beginning, with military installations throughout their empire coming under simultaneous attack. The precision was breathtaking. Orbital shipyards erupted in carefully controlled explosions that eliminated their military production capability while leaving civilian infrastructure intact. Military bases found their defensive systems failing as quantum viruses infiltrated their networks. What made the attacks truly devastating was their selective nature. Civilian transports were ignored while military vessels were systematically disabled. Residential areas remained untouched while command centers burned. It was warfare as surgical procedure rather than blunt instrument. High Admiral Vextar, still commanding the desperate defense of Vorthon Prime, received reports from across the Empire with growing despair. Every major military installation was under attack. Every strategic resource was being eliminated with pinpoint accuracy. And most terrifying of all, the human forces seemed to know exactly where to strike for maximum effect. Sir, his communications officer reported with a shaking voice, we're receiving surrender requests from over 40 installations across the Empire. They're reporting that continued resistance is impossible. Vextar looked at his tactical display, watching as the defensive fleet that had once seemed invincible continued to be systematically dismantled by an enemy that fought like no other species in galactic history. 23 minutes remained on humanity's ultimatum, and the Vorthon Empire was already collapsing. High Minister Thalric's hands trembled as he activated his emergency communication array. Around him, the Galactic Council watched in silence as the leader of one of the galaxy's oldest civilizations faced the complete collapse of his military power. Admiral Vextar, this is the High Minister. Thalric spoke into the communicator, his voice barely steady. What is your assessment of our current situation? The response came immediately, audio crackling with interference from the ongoing battle around Vorthon Prime. High Minister, we have lost 60% of our defensive fleet. Our orbital platforms are being systematically destroyed by weapons we cannot effectively counter. Across the Empire, our military installations are reporting similar losses. Thalric closed his eyes as the magnitude of the defeat settled upon him. Can we continue resistance? A long pause followed before Vextar responded. Sir, these humans are not fighting a war as we understand it. They are conducting a surgical dismantling of our entire military apparatus. They seem to know our capabilities better than we know theirs, and they have positioned assets throughout our space that we never detected. Your recommendation? Immediate surrender, High Minister. Every minute we delay costs more Vorthon lives with no possibility of military victory. The transmission ended, leaving Thalric to face the assembled delegates of the Galactic Council. Around him, Representatives of dozens of species watched with expressions ranging from shock to fear to calculation. The balance of power that had defined galactic civilization for millennia had shifted in a matter of hours. President Veltar spoke into the heavy silence. "High Minister, do you wish to respond to the human ultimatum?" Thalric stood slowly, his ceremonial robe seeming to weigh more than planets. He stopped, struggling to find words that could encompass the magnitude of what had occurred. Ambassador Chen watched with a mixture of sympathy and steel resolve. She understood that she was witnessing the end of an era, the moment when one species' arrogance collided with another's capability and found itself utterly outmatched. "High Minister," Chen said quietly, "your civilization is ancient and proud. It has contributed much to galactic culture and knowledge. This war was not of humanity's choosing, but we will finish it on our terms. The question now is whether the Vorthon people will have a future in the galaxy we're all building." Thalric met her gaze, seeing something there that gave him a fragment of hope. "What terms?" Chen activated her communicator, connecting directly to Admiral Rodriguez. "Admiral, the High Minister is prepared to discuss surrender terms." Rodriguez's image appeared on the chamber's main display, his flagship's bridge visible behind him as the systematic destruction of Vorthon Prime's defenses continued. "High Minister Thalric, you have 7 minutes remaining on our ultimatum. Are you prepared to surrender unconditionally? What assurances do we have that our civilian population will be protected?" "The same assurances you gave our colonies when you attacked them," Rodriguez replied coldly. Then his expression softened slightly. "However, humanity is not in the business of genocide. Your civilian population will be unharmed. Your government will be restructured under human oversight. Your military will be permanently disbanded. Your industrial capacity will be redirected toward peaceful purposes. And our people, our culture, will be preserved," Ambassador Chen interjected. "Humanity has no interest in cultural destruction. We want to end your capacity for aggression, not eliminate your civilization." Thalric looked around the chamber one final time, seeing the faces of delegates who had once treated Vorthon power with respect and fear. Now they looked upon his species with pity and wariness, understanding that the old order had collapsed entirely. "I surrender," he said quietly. "On behalf of the Vorthon Empire, I surrender unconditionally to human forces." Admiral Rodriguez nodded grimly. Transmission confirmed. "All Vorthon forces will immediately cease hostilities and return to designated ports. Human occupation forces will arrive at key installations within 72 hours. Any resistance will be met with immediate force." The transmission ended and an eerie silence fell over the council chamber. In less than 4 hours, humanity had accomplished what no species had managed in thousands of years: the complete military defeat of a galactic empire. Delegate Mordan was the first to speak. "Ambassador Chen, what are humanity's intentions regarding other species? This demonstration of capability has implications for all of us." Chen stood and faced the assembled delegates. "Our intentions remain exactly what they were when I first arrived at this station. We want to contribute to galactic civilization as equals. We want to participate in trade, cultural exchange, and scientific collaboration. But," she continued, her voice taking on a harder edge, "we will no longer tolerate being treated as inferiors or threats simply because we are young. We will no longer accept that ancient prejudices should dictate our place in the galaxy. And we will absolutely not tolerate attacks on our people or our interests." President Veltar leaned forward in his ceremonial chair. "What does this mean for the Galactic Council itself? The balance of power that has maintained peace for millennia has been fundamentally altered." Chen considered the question carefully. "The Council can continue to serve its purpose as a forum for peaceful resolution of disputes, but it can no longer serve as a means for powerful species to dominate weaker ones. The age of might makes right is over." She gestured to the tactical display still showing the aftermath of the Vorthon defeat. "Humanity possesses the capability to enforce galactic peace, but we prefer cooperation to coercion. Other species can choose to work with us as partners, or they can choose to test our resolve as the Vorthons did. I recommend the former." Delegate Kolvan spoke in his species' characteristic slow rumble. "Humans have demonstrated great power, but power corrupts. How do we know you will not become the tyrants you claim to oppose?" Chen smiled sadly. "You don't. That's the nature of trust. It requires faith in others' good intentions. But consider this. We could have eliminated the Vorthon Empire years ago and taken control of their resources. Instead, we sought peaceful coexistence. We could have used today's victory to demand tribute or territory from other species. Instead, we offer partnership. She paused, looking around the chamber at faces that showed fear, calculation, and dawning understanding. The choice now facing every species in this chamber is simple. Do you want to be our enemies, our subjects, or our equals? Because those are the only three options remaining. In the hours that followed, the galaxy began to reshape itself around the new reality. Some species immediately offered alliance and cooperation with humanity. Others retreated into defensive postures, hoping to avoid notice until they could assess the new balance of power. But for Kethavar, sitting in his detention cell aboard Zephyr Station, the irony was absolute. His attempt to prevent human ascendancy had instead triggered the complete transformation of galactic civilization under human leadership. His species' empire had not only fallen, but had fallen so completely that their defeat would be remembered as the moment when humanity's true nature was revealed to the galaxy. As he stared through the energy barriers of his cell at the stars beyond, Kethavar realized that he had not assassinated a diplomat. He had murdered the old galactic order itself. And in its place, something unprecedented had been born. The age of humanity had begun not with diplomatic negotiation or gradual cultural influence, but with the systematic demonstration that some species should never be underestimated. The galaxy would remember this lesson for millennia to come.